Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Black Baseball Mixtape. We are going one on one, and I am very excited, truly honored to go one on one with a tremendous leader in many ways, whether he admits it or not, whether he likes it or not, a pioneer. And when we talk about head coaches in Division One, he is now at a very young age being considered. I saw it written as the dean of black coaches in D1 baseball. This is Georgetown Hoyas coach Edwin Thompson. Coach T, welcome to the Black Baseball Mixtape. How are you?
Great, doing well. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk some baseball today, and excited to just share a little bit about what we do here at Georgetown and myself. So looking forward to it.
Well, your reputation precedes you. It really does. And it's not just a reputation of excellence on the field. We can go into last season, a record number of wins at Georgetown, you turning a program around from your first year. I believe it was 6 wins to 32 wins last season.
Yeah.
It's a history of what you've done as you've gone through your career. But let me talk about, let me first ask you about what we just kind of talked about at a very young age, lower 40s, mid at this point, um, because of the challenges of African American coaches and D1 baseball. You are looked at as a trailblazer, an example, a dean, if you will. When you hear things like that early on, and somebody that I know, you're just kind of looking and saying, "Hey, my career is really, if not just getting started, it's not just getting started, but you're in the peak of your career." How does those references make you feel, and what does that make you think about the challenges we're facing as black leaders in college baseball?
Yeah, I mean, I'm humbled. Anytime I hear that, it's just an honor. To be honest, I think for me, I'm just doing what I know is right, and I know that what I'm capable of doing in the platform that I have, and providing opportunities for younger coaches. And I think that's kind of been a mission of mine probably the last 4 or 5 years, just to really make sure that I'm just going to make sure I leave the game better than when I got here. And I mean that in the sense of just having opportunities for guys, young guys that are trying to get into the game. And during COVID, really was kind of when it started. Like had time to sit back and start breaking down some of the numbers and start looking at exactly how many black coaches we had in Division 1 and just in college in general, and it's basically started a list and kind of put that list together, and did a couple of Zoom calls with a lot of the coaches last offseason, from guys in the big leagues all the guys down to high school level, and just started to grow that, and we'll build that this offseason. So yeah, I mean, I think it's one area that it's important in my life that I want to make sure that I'm doing right, just like the guys before me, that Jay Alexander, who was at Eastern Michigan, out of Detroit, and then Elton Pollock, who's been a pioneer. He's been a lot longer than I have at the Division 1 level at Presbyterian College. But guys that I look to when I came into the game, like, who can I look to? It looks like me, and that was an area that it wasn't, and so I just try to hopefully impact that as I go a little bit.
In the last couple of years in your discovery, we always hear in professional industries, whether it's engineering or especially entrepreneurial in Silicon Valley, they use kind of the term pipeline problem. So it's oh, well, we would hire this software engineer if we could find them. We
Yeah.
don't find them over at Facebook or Microsoft. And what we've discovered over the last 4 or 5 years, it's not a pipeline problem. They're African American engineer degrees and developers are cranking out all the time. It's easier in many ways not to hire them than it is to hire them. And so in the last couple of years, while you're, like you said, you're making databases, making lists, you're really digging into this, you're calling high school coaches. What have you found is the biggest challenge to point, as in regards to point of entry, to getting younger African Americans or even experienced African Americans in the college ranks, especially at the college level?
Yeah, I think that, like anything, networking is an important part. Having that connections, like any industry, it's all about who you know. And I think sometimes if you come up from a smaller school, so to speak, you may not have the connections that you would have from a bigger school. And so that those trying to kind of connect the dots and helping young coaches kind of just understand the process of what it takes to be hired, to get an interview, to do those type of things. And that's kind of been part education, part knowledge, and having that information is allowing guys to make better opportunities for themselves. And ultimately, I always tell them I may help connect you with a coach, but ultimately, you're going to have to do the interview. So part of what I try to do when I mentor young guys is just try to give them that what it's going to take in an interview process to get the job, as long as their skill set allows them to, and what job they're looking for. Obviously, if you're a young coach, you're not going to go coach the Yankees. I mean, it's just not realistic. So you have to kind of be, just like I tell my hitters, you have to know who you are as a hitter. You have to know where you're at as a coach. And I think sometimes as coaches, as competitors, you think you're higher level than maybe you really are. So kind of just be in that realistic area. But I think the challenges are always just going to be the network. And so we're trying to grow that network and space it out and make different connections and allow them to grow in whether, even if you don't get the job or just get that interview, right, and get that practice. I think sometimes hearing no actually is a good thing in the coaching space, because you don't want every job that you get offered. And so you have to kind of navigate that in itself to make sure I actually have a good job, maybe at a smaller school, but it's actually a pretty good job until the next job that it may be better in my career, instead of going laterally just because, it may sound better. So there's just things of that nature.
Now, talk to me about you personally. Did you always want to be a coach? And how did your coaching journey begin? Because you've been to a couple of stops. You've USA Baseball. It seems like you kind of always had this in you, and this is what you wanted to do. But how did it happen for you?
Yeah, I think at a young age, I at a young age, I'm roller skating to my family. That's what we did, and speed skating, roller hockey. So like at a young age, I really I worked and I coached and I trained people how to skate. Basically, at 12, I was training adults how to skate and at a high level. So, and then I got hurt my senior year of baseball. Going into my senior, I was playing hoops. I broke my ankle, and so the first part of the preseason, I was injured, and so essentially, I could hang out and do nothing, or I just end up just being basically the JV coach, because we didn't have another coach, and so at the time, so they hadn't hired anybody yet, and so I would just take the hitters or take the players and started coaching even my senior year. So my high school coach allowed me to do that. And then in my off season of playing in minor league baseball, I coached my first job was middle school basketball and JV basketball, 10, 11-year-olds at my high school where I was working at in the off season to make some money. And it kind of just, I don't know, sparked me. And I ended up playing another half season or whatever it was. And then I just got let go. And then it was like, now what? And so the only thing I knew, I kind of gravitated towards teaching. Both my parents were teachers and educators. So I kind of got into the education part of it. And then from there, I started training players, all sports, just athletically in my town in Maine. So from football, from a professional women's basketball player to a college football player to like some baseball players. And then just it kind of evolved to I ended up coaching high school football for 4 years, high school basketball 4 years. So I did a lot prior to me actually getting into baseball full time, honestly. So it was really allowed me to kind of grow as a coach. And then, about 4 years into my coaching journey was when I first got my first head coaching position. That's when I was but I wasn't even full time just baseball. So I did college football at Bates College in the fall, and then I was the baseball coach in the spring. So my first baseball only job was when I went to Duke University in 2010, the summer of 2010. So it took a long time to get to the point where I was just a baseball coach, because I thought I wasn't going to be a baseball coach. I thought it was going to be something else, hoops or whatever it was. So yeah, kind of but I always had a sense that even in college, I was hurt again my senior year in college. Funny trend, right? You kind of see the trend, but that's why I was an average player. But I just kind of got hurt my senior year and started helping out the young guys. To kind of same thing. I came back obviously, but it was just kind of gets always in me, and kind of figured once I got the platform to utilize my skill set, I kind of just took off and I just loved it. So I haven't looked back. Year 19 of coaching college baseball, so.
And there's so much that goes into we hear about it all the time on kind of a grandiose scale, but there's so much that goes into being a Division I head coach that has very little to do what's actually on the field. Right? There's player management. Now you're dealing with all kinds of administrative stuff like transfer portals and extra years, obviously because of the pandemic. what is it that you've seen in kind of today's landscape that, you know, makes it more difficult for a player, I mean, a coach, excuse me, a coach like yourself? I mean, I'm assuming the first thing is in baseball in general, there's limited scholarships. I don't believe Georgetown, I believe, are there no scholarships? Like,
No, we
there's
have
just,
scholarships.
okay,
Yeah,
you
it's
do.
limited. So we're limited. The baseball in general. Yeah, I can't go to watch a kid play and say, "Hey, we like you. You can get
Right,
into school. Here's a full ride."
right,
Right. And so
right.
those
And
are
people don't
challenges.
know that. A lot of people would just assume that it's
Yeah.
like some like basketball or football or like the other sports.
Yeah. So it's a challenge for all coaches. And I don't care if you're at Georgetown, you're at a state school, paying to go to play is always a challenge. And so I think that's why the NCAA created the NIL to allow the student athletes to have the opportunity to monetize themselves, make some money. But I think the challenges are just like you said, is there's a lot to do outside of just coaching. I
Sure.
mean, there's a number that people say as coaches, like 75% of my job is not baseball coaching as a head coach. It really isn't. You're administrating a lot, you're managing a lot. Um, but I think we love the baseball. When we get out in the field, it's like, oh, we get out here for 3 hours and it's just great. But the preparation and all those things. So there's a lot of behind the scenes. I think, but I kind of think that's what I like. I like that
Mm,
aspect. I like the balance that we're able to do. As an assistant, I was, you're so laser focused on that. I think as a head coach, you have so many different people. We have 60 people in our organization. I got to kind of manage
sure.
and help, guide, lead, inspire, if you will. But then also I got my people I have to answer to, an alumni. You have boosters, you have donors, and then you just have your community, right? So you try to balance all those things out, and sometimes it can get overwhelming. But for the most part, as I said, I've done it kind of like the 19th year, so I have an idea of how to balance when's a good time. Like we're getting right into our fall practices starting
Sure.
up tomorrow. So our time will go from we only had 4 hours of instructional time to now it'll probably be like 15 hours, 14 hours a week. So that part of it will change, and then just a flow. So it's kind of, you just kind of get used to it, but there's never, it's never a dull moment coaching athletics in college,
Sure.
because you're always kind of helping something or doing something, which kind of makes it fun and not just kind of, the routine of the daily work. It just, you kind of just get lost into the day, but you just have fun while you're doing it. So
Coach, I'm going to ask you about your turnaround on the field, especially with Georgetown. But the first reference that I believe I read your name was, it was only a few years ago, and it was a undefeated article. Now it's called Anscape,
mhm.
about your work at Eastern Kentucky. But the interesting part of this article that has always stood out to me, and I wanted to ask you about it, was the number of this article was about the number of African American players.
Mhm.
When we talked a lot about coaching in the past, but the number of African American players that you bought to your school at Eastern Kentucky, and the way that they played the game, and the
Mhm.
way that the school was actually making this, you know, miracle turnaround, and it wasn't, it was, I can't remember what the percentage of players was. It wasn't like over 50%, but it was in the starting lineup. Um, was that intentional at the time, and is that something that you keep in mind, or is it just, hey, I'm going to get the best players I can, if they, I will do
Yeah.
that. But clearly you had players that you've taken throughout your career that either other people took a flyer on, took a pass on. I know some of them
Yeah.
chose to play with you because you're a black head coach. But
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about being able to see the talent that we have with African American players, and your intentions to bring them on your squad, and seeing if they're getting, do we feel like they're getting opportunities in other programs?
Yeah, again, I think it's a pretty cool time. So our university, Eastern Kentucky at the time, had a great scholarships for minority students, and so obviously being not fully funded, or not being, I mean, not having full rides for everybody. How do you manage? How do you maximize what the school has, right? And so it was a first generational school. It had a lot of emphasis on diversity, and so I always, every school I've been at, I try to recruit to my university to make sure we look like our university. And so I think that helps our student athletes have a great experience, help you learn from each other. Um, intentional is always going to be to get in the right people. That's my number one goal. And I don't care if you're in the inner city of Atlanta or you're in the Eastern Kentucky mountains. I mean, I've always tried to find the right people that fit. And because, just like the kid from the mountains of Kentucky at the time, they're no different than the inner city kid that's overlooked, right? Because they're not in the travel ball circuit, some in general. So, how do you kind of create that environment where it's welcoming for everybody? And that's kind of what we try to do and establish no matter where I've been at. I think that's been a strength of mine, because people, they can relate. And, one of the best stories is that we had two kids, one white, one black, from the inner city of Atlanta to the mountains of Kentucky, and they're best friends. And because they both were first, getting into it together, they both had challenges because they both were limited, of lacking of their opportunities to be seen. I happen to see them at different things. And so just that connection. So I think that part of it from an intentional standpoint, I always try to find the right people that fit our organization. That's number one. And so where that comes and how it goes, at that time, we had 18 players of color on our roster out of 35. And obviously that was historic on some capacity.
It was the most in
Yeah, I mean,
baseball at the time.
At a non HBCU. And so that part of it, and we had 4 black coaches, right? And I had females on staff. And so like, even with our coaching staff, like right now we have 6, black coaches and females on my staff. And that's important. But it's also important to provide, my graduate assistant from Iowa who's here, right? And just giving people opportunity like people have given me is kind of what I just want to pay it forward. And, being from a small town growing up, that's always been kind of in coming from a small school, Division III for 6 years that I coached prior to getting to Division I. It's the same thing. Nothing changed. It's not as glamorous as coming from a Power 5 school, right? Division III, so. When I interview coaches and I interview people, it's like, what story do you have? What experiences do you have that can relate to me? And then ultimately present that to my players, no matter where they're from.
It also helps, and it goes without saying, that you win a ton of games. It's easier. It's a little easier, Coach, when you win a ton. I mean, everywhere you've gone, it doesn't take long for you to start winning a ton of games. And this year, I mean, Georgetown is going into. So my question is, now we went from the first year that was 6 wins. Let's back up even a little bit. I think the last year you had before the pandemic, you were like undefeated or something. It was insane. It was like 12-2 or something like that.
During the pandemic, we were 12-2 at Eastern Kentucky.
Right.
We beat LSU. We won 8 in a row. We were on pace to who knows what could have happened. Like the pitch story, right? And then COVID hits.
And then you turn to Georgetown first season, very difficult. Didn't even know if you were going to play. Didn't get any of the all-season workouts. That's a 6-win season. Your first full season at Georgetown, I'd like to say it that way. What is it? A record number, 32 wins.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, given the team that you have, when you're going into this year, like how do you top this? What do you do? You've already got the record, Coach. What are you going to do?
Well, I give you context on the 6 wins. We had 7 days of practice.
Right. No, I'm familiar with this.
So I just want to let your viewers understand 6 wins wasn't. So we lost like 8 or 9 games by 2 runs or less. So we were right there, and we just said, okay, we just need practice. And so our coaching staff, our players that we recruited, really did a great job. And I think, like anything, every year as a coach, everyone has the same goal, right? Get to Omaha, get to the College World Series, win your championship. And I think, but for us, I've really kind of just focused on, I always tell our team, we don't want to lose to Georgetown. Like yesterday, we had a practice, and there was a period of time we had a couple of different things. We lost to Georgetown. We made a couple of errors, and we lost. And I said to him, that's what it looks like, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the philosophy we want to have is establish, just don't lose to us. We may lose a game, but if we get beat, we get beat, but just don't lose to us. So really focusing on just us. And I think that's been, it's a coach talk, but it's just, there's a lot to be said about that. There's a lot to be, people are hungry, right? We didn't win a game in the postseason, right? So there's things that we have to improve on to get where we want to be, ultimately get to the NCAA tournament, which Georgetown has never been at, right? And last year was our first, winning season since 1986. People are like, wow, that's amazing. So perspective, it is amazing, but internally, like anything, we're competitors and we want to get, I told them, I hope we break it next year, right? That's our, and if we don't, we just hope we have a, best year we can. So Yeah, I mean, how do you top it? You win more, right? That's how it works. That's the nature of this results-oriented business. So you win 35, win, whatever it is. So, but we just focus on just us getting better and hopefully playing good baseball by the time we get to the postseason. That's our always going to be my goals. No matter if you go to the College World Series, you win a championship, you got to get the postseason in your conference. So that's the first step, and then go from there.
Coach, I'm gonna get you out of here, but I'm gonna switch gears a little bit on a
Sure.
couple of topics. You said you grew up playing the game, but you also played all kinds of sports. Who are your favorite athletes growing up?
Well, athletes just in general. I grew up. Michael Jordan was. Everyone had that, but
Yeah,
Ricky
yeah.
Henderson, Ken Griffey Jr. From that baseball. I liked hockey, so I had Eric Lindros was a guy that I used to like watching.
I was going to say we
Um,
buried the lead here. You were talking about hockey and skate shops. We didn't talk about this at all. This was not in my research. I didn't
yeah,
know about your hockey
that's all
love.
right. Yeah, and then football. I like Randall Cunningham at the time. I loved watching him play Barry Sanders. So just, any great athlete at the time was just, I enjoyed just seeing guys compete. That's kind of really what started me in baseball was, I just saw a lot of players that looked like me at the time. And it was like, I liked that. And it was fun. And, but yeah, I played all sports. So I kind of just, I had posted everyone on my wall. So I think like everyone
How,
did it as growing up
so
back then in
Howard
the 80s.
Bryant, a couple months back now, it might be even a little bit longer than that, just released his biography on Ricky Henderson. I don't know if you've read it.
Yeah, I have it.
Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm reading it. Yeah.
it is amazing.
Yeah.
But it made me go back and look at stats, and I want to say it was like August 2nd or something. I've been following obviously a lot of the MLB and a lot of the stats a lot closer this year, but I think it was like August 2nd. I saw a tweet that said Ricky Henderson woke up today with 100 stolen bases, and he had like he had like 3 months to go in the season.
Right.
That was the year he scored. He stole 130. I want to say
30.
137 that year.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
just like this, and then I looked at the Major League Baseball stats in comparison, and I think the leader was at 29 this year. So the
Yeah.
game has completely changed
Yeah.
in
It's
that
changed.
sense.
It changed. But who knows? Maybe some of these new rules may change some things that get the
Yeah,
guys more bases.
I
So
was in, I was interested in that. Let me ask you, because in today's game we have so many, um, so many exciting players, and especially exciting players that are African American. We were talking about the Henderson days. I think the watershed mark was around 1981, 1982, when it was about 20% African Americans in the major leagues.
mm-hmm,
Now we're about down to it fluctuates between 7 or 8 in the
mm-hmm,
major leagues right now. But there is an upswing,
mm-hmm.
especially about young players. And if you looked at the draft this year, I want
Yeah.
to say like the 5 out of the first 6 or 5 out of the first 7 were African American, American born players.
Mm-hmm.
We've had some dark days though from the 80s to now.
Yeah.
If you're as somebody that's been around the game, you're recruiting, you worked at USA Baseball, what would you say is like the biggest challenge to get African Americans more into the system, more into the game, and interested
Yeah.
as they were back if we were looking at the mid to early 80s and
Well,
before.
I can tell you this: it's coming. There's a wave coming. There's kids, the guys in the minor leagues that I've seen over the last 3 to 5 years that they're coming. There's a big wave. Major League Baseball has made a great point with Dell Matthews, Tony Regans at the youth development area, Hank Aaron Invitational Breakthrough Series. So there's a big wave coming of some really talented players like you got a guy like Michael Harris, who
In
who came
Atlanta,
to
yeah.
the system of the RBI program and that system. So there's a lot of players coming up, and I think the way that's going to help, it's going to help the kids that. And there's tons of kids playing. I think that's always a misconception. I mean, that's just if you just obviously you may not see as many in the college game, and that's kind of where you get more black coaches. Hopefully, you get more black players, and it kind of a trickle. But it's just a process. But I think there's a lot of players, and just speaking this from a recruiting standpoint. When I go watch an event, the general there's more players playing, and that is there's no doubt about it in my mind. So I think that what they've done is made the game fun or cool, whatever you want to look at it. But I think this great wave of guys that are there, Mookie Betts and some of those guys that are superstars, they're it's starting to kind of trickle down a little bit. Again, I think will it get to the point like it was in the 80s? I don't know about that. That's just kind of numbers in the country that all that
Sure.
stuff. There's a lot of the numbers, but I think if we can get to like 12 to 15. I think that's going to be a really good number and realistic number that will happen over time. And then I think it's in teams to be more intentional who they draft and they develop. And so I think that part will take care of itself. Again, you see the next 3 to 5 years, I bet you that the number is going to be over 10, 12%, 15%, hopefully would be the dream to get closer to that number. But I think you'll see more guys going to college. I really feel like there's more guys playing in college since there was 5 years ago.
Sure.
In general, other schools and other programs, I think it's that part of it's going to become more. You see guys more committing. So again, all that stuff is kind of a process, and it's just like anything, it takes time. And sometimes in the world we live in, we don't want it. We want everything right now. But I think even like coaches, I mean, we had major up. And last year there was 2 black head coaches at predominantly white institutions, and now this year there was 4 hires, 3 hires. So there's like a huge or 3 hires, sorry, and so that's a big deal. It's the most coaches of black coaches there has been ever, right, at the non-HBCU. So it will take time. Things are going to come, and I think it just over time it'll get to a number that it's healthy.
Coach, you've got a lot of goals. You said it. You got goals for Georgetown. You've got goals as you move forward. So look, I don't want anyone at Georgetown to get upset with me. I'm not going to ask any particular questions about immediate stuff, but long term, when your career is over, when your coaching career is over, and you look back on it, is there a kind of a pinnacle? Is it coaching in the major leagues? Is it playing in the postseason? Is it World USA back? Like, is there something where not immediate Georgetown? Don't get he's here. He's your coach. He's gonna be here. But when you look back on it, is there something that you could say, I'm really proud in my legacy I was able to do this?
I just think growing the game. I think that's my biggest goal is just to be able to impact other people, other leaders. In my last year of guys that I've helped move on, that kind of, I had one guy that was a hitting coach, and 2 other guys were scouts. So helping guys of color get into the game in all the different areas. Obviously, coaching is my position. And I've helped a lot, I think, at least in the guidance and behind the scenes and interview prep and some of that stuff. So I think if I can look back and say that there's coaches that I've helped that are still coaching when I'm done, and there's more than just one, then I think that I've done my job, because I've now they kind of taken that torch and passed it on like any other coach that wants to have a legacy. I think that's something but I think that's my thing. It's just championships and wins and all those things. And again, I'm competitive, and I expect that out of myself. And if I'm doing something, I want to do it right and do it well. But I think at the end of it, as long as my players feel that I was able to impact their lives, and I was able to be honest and consistent with them, and I'm not always perfect and not going to win every game, but if I can have those 2 things, like my players felt that I would impact their life, and then the coaches that I was able to help, or the people, staff, that's kind of I'd be very happy if I got done tomorrow and that was what people said about me.
Well, I can tell you this, Coach. If you were done tomorrow, which you're not going to be, you've already built that legacy in regards to growing the game, making it, giving especially young coaches someone to look at, but obviously giving players of all colors and creeds and races a person to look up to just by the example that you lead. It has been just awesome following your journey these last couple of years, and now being able to talk to you. It has been a pleasure. Yeah. So we'll I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I'm not too far away, so I'll try to come up and see some Georgetown baseball and see you run the team, and that's really exciting. Last thing I'll get you out on, just because we alluded to it before we came on the air, you are obviously not the first legendary Coach Thompson at Georgetown University, so you go by Coach T often. You said there's a story behind it.
Yeah, well, I just think the day that I got hired was the day that he passed away. Really sad day as a person that grew up watching him on TV and Coach Thompson. So I always just say I'm Coach T. There's only one Coach Thompson at Georgetown. So, but that was kind of, really unique that it happened on the day I was hired. He passed away, and I wish I was able to meet him and talk to him and soak in knowledge. But just being in the buildings, being in these halls, there's a presence that I try to obviously just be the best version of myself, my family. But there is I think a prideful moments of just being here and knowing that the history of the university with that last name. So it's a pretty cool honor just to be here. I mean, I grew up as a 10, 12-year-old with Georgetown, like every kid in the 80s. It's
Sure.
just wanted to, now that I'm actually the head coach, it's pretty powerful thing. So, but yeah, I always say just always just call me Coach T because there's just a one Coach Thompson. So, but yeah, we will be down in Richmond October 16th if you want to come watch over at the Diamond. So 1 o'clock.
Absolutely.
I'll
I'd
watch it.
say
Yeah.
I'd mentioned before the schedule is you guys play a very tough schedule. It's a pretty amazing schedule where you have several ACC teams that are kind of
Yeah.
one-off games, and then you had some amazing teams like VCU, which was my alma mater. I went to VCU.
Nice.
Have a pretty strong team, and so Coach, I am ecstatic to be able to have this time with you. I
Yeah.
wish you the best of luck as you go through the season, and I'd love to see you in Richmond. So if
Yeah.
everyone that can follow, you're actually a pretty good social media follow as well. Your Twitter, I don't know if you do it yourself, but your Twitter handle's pretty
Yeah.
active. So
Yeah. I
everybody.
do it. I do it myself. So get out and
Everybody
follow.
follow Coach T and follow Georgetown baseball as they have a great upcoming season. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Black Baseball Mixtape, and we'll be back after this.